Hey everyone, in today's video, I'm going to be going over probably one of the best strength slash magic builds you can use. Like, not only do you dish out a crazy amount of damage, you also have an insane amount of health, stamina, poise. You're pretty much just a juggernaut steamrolling everything and everybody that stands in front of you. So I have no doubts about it, you're going to have an absolute blast with this build. But anyways, let's actually get into the build now. So the weapon in our main hand, we're going to want to use the Royal Greatsword. This thing is absolutely fantastic, except it's a little bit strange, because it doesn't have the greatest scaling in strength or intelligence, coming in at a C rating, but I am able to keep the attack power above 1100, which is really good for a good amount of time too. Obviously this is going to consist of a few items, like for example the Magic Scorpion Charm. This just increases all of our magical damage by 12%, which is actually really huge when you think about it, because if we go back to our sword, a big chunk of our damage is magic damage. So this is going to increase both our basic attack damage and our special attack damage, since that also deals magic damage. Now the one downside to this talisman is it does make our character take 10% increased physical damage, but that's perfectly okay, because we are going to use some really heavy armor that offers a ton of protection, so that's going to help out with alleviating the negative effects from this talisman. Then the second method I use to increase our character's strength is very simple, it's just the Flask of Wondrous Physic, but the two tiers I use make it insanely powerful. The first one being the Magic-Shrouding tier, which is very similar to the Magic Scorpion Charm, but this one increases our magic damage by 20%, and instead of making us take 10% increased physical damage, it only lasts for 3 minutes. Then the other tier I'm using, which is pretty similar to it but not exactly, that's the Strength Crystal Knot tier. This is going to increase our strength by 10 levels for 3 minutes, because again with the sword it scales with intelligence and strength. So when it comes to using the flask, I would just recommend to use it literally whenever, because you don't need to save it right before boss fights, because there will always be a bonfire right before the big fight. And both of the tiers last for 3 minutes, which is usually more than enough time for you to get, I want to say at least halfway to 2/3 of the way to another bonfire to refill it at. So just use it freely. Now going back to our weapons, we actually have something in our offhand, and surprisingly, it's not a secondary colossal sword, but rather a great shield, or more exactly, the Eclipse CREST Great Shield. Little bit of a tongue twister, but that's okay. The shield is absolutely phenomenal, even better than a second colossal sword in this situation, and I'll tell you exactly why. When you do wield swords, you're obviously going to double your damage because you're getting an additional sword. But the thing is that you don't need that extra damage, because we already kill every weaker level enemy to stronger level enemies with just a handful of swings. And when it comes to dealing with bosses, we actually use the Ash of War on the Royal Greatsword just as much as we do with our basic attacks, because the damage on it is absolutely insane. It basically does more damage than power stancing 2 colossal swords, and this also places the status effect freeze on enemies, which, if you didn't know, when this builds up it deals 5% of their max health as damage, which, you know, that doesn't really sound that great, but it also makes the enemy take 20% increased damage for 30 seconds. So you're pretty much doing lots of damage to the boss, debuffing him, and then the Ash of War itself is extremely easy to use. Once you start the animation up, your character gains a ridiculous amount of hyper armor, which usually allows you to go straight through most bosses' attacks without getting knocked back. And even if you miss the initial attack, the second part of it does do an explosion, so there is a good AoE effect to it, which means if you are fighting multiple targets like 2 bosses or a group of strong enemies, you can actually hit all of them. Now let me get back to the Eclipse CREST Great Shield and why you want to use this exact one. If we take a look at its stats, it's actually nothing crazy, it's just a bit better than your average Great Shield. It weighs at about 15 pounds, so it's not too heavy, not too light, just right in the middle. It has 100% physical damage negation, which is what we really want, and it also has a really solid guard boost of 75, so when we do block hits, it doesn't consume that much stamina. But the two deciding factors for this shield were, one, the Ash of War it comes with, no skill. While we have our shield in our offhand, we can still use the special attack of the weapon in our main hand, which happens to be the Royal Greatsword. So instead of swapping back and forth between your shield and sword to use your special attack, you can keep your shield up to block a hit, and then follow up instantly with your special attack to get off a lot of damage really quickly and really safely. Then the second reason for this shield is it has this passive on it where it actually increases our resistance against status effects. So when you're dealing with enemies that inflict rot, poison, bleed, frost, you get the idea. It's going to be a lot more difficult for them to proc that on you, saving you a lot of headaches and annoyances of your health slowly going down until you get to a bonfire or have some sort of way to deal with that status effect. And since we're using an ultra great sword and a great shield in both of our hands, that's going to be quite a bit of weight on our back. So I'm also going to be using the ERDTREE'S Favor +2 talisman, which increases our HP by 4%. That doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me, at the end of this build, I am able to reach almost 2000 HP total, so that definitely helps out. It also increases our stamina by 9.6%, which is going to allow us to be able to block more hits before our guard gets broken, and we're also going to be able to swing our sword a lot more before, obviously, we run out of stamina. Then lastly, it's also going to increase our max equip load by 8%, which is really helpful because we are going to be using a heavy sword, a heavy shield, and I haven't even gotten into the armor yet, and that stuff is going to be extremely heavy as well. All in all, it's just an amazing talisman to use for whenever you're making a Juggernaut styled build. But anyways, let's get into the armor now. So you guys have probably been wondering, what armor is this guy using? This looks absolutely insane, and how can I get it? Now, the armor set that I'm using is actually just the Fire Prelate set, except I am using a mod just to change the cosmetic look of the armor. Cosmetic look only. So the weight, damage negation, and resistance is all the exact same. None of those numbers have changed whatsoever, and this mod only changes the look of it. If you do want to use this mod, I will put a link to it in the description down below. But just a note to self, if you choose to download this mod, you will not be able to play online or you will get banned. That's why all of the recording I did was in single player mode and not online. If you don't want to use the regular Fire Prelate set, I completely understand that because it is extremely ugly, and that's kind of the main reason why I downloaded this cosmetic mod. But there are other heavier armors you can wear in the game that will do the exact same thing and look much better. Again, we are wearing some extremely heavy armor and very heavy weapons, so ERDTREE'S Favor +2 isn't going to be enough to help out with this entire equip load and still be able to roll fast. So that's why you'll also want to equip the Greatjar's Arsenal, and this talisman is absolutely needed for this build. It increases our max equip load by 19%, which helps us save a lot of points in endurance, so we can put those extra points into either strength, intelligence for more damage, or if you want to get some more mana, you can put a few extra points into mind to use your Ash of War a few extra times before you run out. Now finally, let's go over the minimum stats required so you can use everything in this build effectively. You'll need at least 32 strength, 18 dex, and 22 intelligence to wield both the sword and the shield. Afterwards, I would recommend getting around 53 endurance just so you can wear the entire Fire Prelate set, but if you choose to use a different armor set, you are going to have to play around with it to see how much endurance you will need to still be able to fast roll. It will most likely be less because I am wearing one of the heaviest armor sets in the game, so that's not too much to worry about. But afterwards, I would recommend putting majority of your points into strength and intelligence just to increase your damage, or even mind, again, to increase your mana so you can use your Ash of War attack more often. Oh, and I almost forgot about our last talisman. We're actually going to be going with RADAGON'S SORESEAL, another great talisman. This is going to increase our vigor, endurance, strength, and dexterity by 5 levels each, so we basically save about a total of 20 levels with this one talisman. Now the downside to this is it is going to make us take 15% increased damage, similar to the Magic Scorpion charm, but I think this is a lot more effective though. Also, because we have such a huge health pool and tons of armor, you won't really notice the negative effects of those two talismans when you are fighting other enemies. Like, you will take damage, but you won't die in just 1 or 2 hits. Like, you can still take a good beating and keep going. But anyways, that's about everything for today's video. I do want to give a big thanks to the members of my channel for supporting me on my videos and the future ones to come. If you guys want more information on all the gear I'm using, it'll all be in the description down below. Thanks for watching everybody, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.